Greetings, I am Herbert Erpaderp, and today I'm going to build the Plastic Soldier Company SU-76 self-propelled gun. This is a 15mm scale, or if you prefer, 1/100th scale plastic wargaming kit, and as the box tells us, some assembly is required. Good, that's how we like it. The back of the box has a basic painting and marking guide, and tells us that we can make 5 of these models and that there are options for early or late variants of the SU-76, and that there are crew figures. Cool. Let's have a quick look at the sprues. There are 5 sprues, each of which makes one SU-76, just as the box says. These sprues are neat and nicely moulded. There are mould lines because there's always mould lines. I wouldn't say they're particularly bad on this kit, but you will have to do a bit of cleanup. Nothing too taxing though, I'm sure you'll be fine. I do have one complaint about the sprues. There's a part shown in the instructions that doesn't appear on the sprue itself, nor does it appear on the sprue diagram, only in the instructions. I'll show that once I get to that point in the build. That complaint doesn't otherwise detract from the quality of the parts on the sprues. I would say it's very good. I think the detailing is rather nice, though you do have to bear in mind that this is in fact a wargaming model, and 15mm scale is rather small. Because of that, and to allow the model to be rugged enough to be handled during games, some detail is obviously going to be omitted or simplified a bit. I say this in pretty much every video about kits like this one, but some people just don't seem to get the concept. Anyway, it looks pretty good for what it is. You'll easily identify it on the gaming table as an SU-76. The crew figures also look pretty decent. There are 4 figures here, and as you can see, there are 2 in each pose. The difference is they're wearing different uniforms. I'm not sure if this is a difference between early and late crews or just different uniforms, but it is a nice feature. Okay, so that's what's on the sprue. There are no decals, and the only other thing we get in the box is the instruction leaflet, which on this side has a sprue diagram showing the parts needed for early and late versions of the SU-76. They're really not all that different. The instructions here are fairly simple, which makes sense. It's not an especially complicated model. In fact, it's really quite a simple model. This is a fairly large leaflet, so everything is easy to see and understand here. There's not really much more to say about that, so let's glue some bits of plastic together. I start with the tracks, because that seemed like as good a place as any, and it's what the instructions want. I wouldn't rebel against the instructions, would I? These are, as you can see, a single piece. This makes things nice and easy. There's a couple of nubs on the back of the track part that aren't guide pins, and these should be trimmed off if you want the track sets to fit, which I assume you do. You can see how these will interfere with a good fit here. There are guide pins, and these are a bit lower than the nubs we want to remove. Unless you want a bit of a challenge, the guide pins can stay, because they're helpful. The next step is to attach the upper hull part. There isn't any keying for this as such, but it pretty much just drops right into place nice and neat. A little pressure to ensure a nice fit, and it's done. You might notice there's a huge hole to the rear, and that's where we put this fighting compartment part, I guess you might call it. Make sure you've got this around the right way, and you shouldn't have any problems. The lower front plate part can be installed next. This goes into place nice and easy, though I'm not totally sure that gap at the top of it should be there. If this is an issue, it shouldn't be too hard to fill with putty later on, so I'm not going to worry too much about it. Next, I put the gun together. The gun itself doesn't require any assembly, however this big chunk, whatever you might want to call it, should be slid over the main gun, as you can see I've done, and neglected to film the process because I'm very good at what I do. But it's together, and you can probably imagine how it went together. Onto the bottom of that, I glue this part, sandwiching the gun in the middle. Sandwich. This needed quite a bit of pressure to go together, and I was still unable to make it gap-free. I don't think it's going to be especially noticeable though, so it could be worse. I also carefully drilled out the end of the gun, and it looks a lot more convincing when there's a hole for the rounds to come out of. It's a plastic model! It doesn't actually fire any rounds, idiot! You keep your filthy lying mouth shut. This gun was, in my opinion, almost too small to drill out, but I'm glad I did. It looks much better. Next I add I don't think this is called a casemate. but it probably has a name that isn't bit of metal behind which the crew can hide from shooty boys, though that is a sensible name. This isn't too difficult to install, though it's definitely a bit more fiddly on the vehicle's left. There's less for it to sit against, and you can't just press down on it and have it sitting in the right place. You've got to find the right height and then sort of press in from the side. I think the video explains it better than my feeble words do. I then tried to install the gun assembly, and it didn't quite fit. It's ever so slightly too wide, and was pushing the wall parts out. My solution, not shown, was to gently shave down the sides of the gun part with my knife. Nothing too tricky, I just didn't film it. Once that's done, I glue the gun assembly into place. It's still not a perfect fit, but it's close enough. Good strong Soviet construction, that's what we'll tell them. I've been following the instructions, but I think when I build the other 4 of these, I'll do things a bit differently. The next thing to do is add the driver's hatch, and if you look at it you can probably figure out that the gun is a little bit in the way. It's not a big deal, and I still got the hatch into place, though it did take significantly more fiddling to get it into place than it would have if the gun wasn't there. Just a little observation really. The instructions aren't always the optimal way to do things. Next comes this box. It has vents on the side, and I have no idea what it is. Probably an air conditioning unit. It goes into place easily, and you can see there's a sort of raised guide on the mudguard that works as keying. I add the rear wall of the fighting compartment next, and this is one of the 2 different parts for the early or late variant, and they do look quite similar, so be sure that you are using the correct parts. The parts I'm using are for the late version SU-76, but assembly is the same. This rear wall took a little bit of force to get into place, and it's a little bit hard to see, but there's kind of a slot on the back for this to slide down and into. It wasn't immediately obvious to me, but eventually I got it. Next, I glue the 2 muffler and exhaust pipe parts together. This was a bit fiddly, but there's some keying to help, and help it does. That assembly goes into place here, and there isn't really anything to guide this. One of the end parts goes into that little box, and the mufflers rest on top of the air conditioner I installed earlier. It's not an air conditioner, you idiot! Whatever. The point is, it's not too difficult to get this into place. You can see on the side of the hull, just forward of the exhausts, are some what appear to be guides for the little box part I mentioned wasn't included on the sprue. It is in the instructions, and it definitely looks like something should be there. I spent a good amount of time staring at the sprue thinking I might just be missing it, but no, it just isn't there. Moving on, I add these little stowage boxes below the fighting compartment's left wall. These go into place just as easily as it looks like they do. It looks really easy! That's what I was getting at. And then this, I assume it's a rolled up cover for the fighting compartment, but it could be a nice big sleeping bag. Either way, whatever it is, there's nothing to guide it. And I guess you could just leave it off if you prefer. I wanted it on, so I eyeball its position and it's on. Hooray! And that's about all there is to this model. Looks like we're back to the videos with no locking tab mechanism. If you wanted, you could add the 2 crew figures, or if you really want crew, you could add all 4. I'm not going to stop you. Anyway, that's the Plastic Soldier Company SU-76 in 15mm scale completed. It's a nice, neat little kit, and I think the end result is rather good. It's not a large, mighty, imposing vehicle, but it's a fine addition to my already quite large 15mm scale Soviet force. As always, I can't tell you how realistic the model is, but it looks like how an SU-76 should look to my untrained eyes, and that's enough for me. Obviously it's not going to be a perfect replica, and that's not the purpose of the model. It fills the role of a wargaming piece very nicely. It is, unfortunately, missing a piece, though I'm not totally sure how important that box on the right really is, and I'm not feeling especially worried about it. It is a little bit annoying, but it's not the worst thing in the world. Either we can make up a story about how some no-good punk kids have stolen it, or you could scratch build your own little box to go there fairly easily. This is a fun and pretty easy kit to put together. It's probably stating the obvious to say that it was easy, and wargaming kits are usually intended to be pretty easy to whip together so you can get your force out on the table and ready to fight in fairly short order. And I would say that you could certainly get all 5 SU-76s in this box together in a short afternoon plastic gluing session. even if you were to build them at a nice, slow, relaxed pace. You don't need to rush to get these done quick. I don't really have a whole lot to say about this that hasn't already been said or shown in the video. I have no profound and earth-shattering commentary.
What's unusual about that, Herbert?
So if you have any questions or comments, feel free to put them in the comment section below. If you've built one of these, or any other cool models and you want to share, why not drop by our friendly Discord community and show us some pictures? We would love to see what you've done. If you want to watch me build kits like this one live, head on over to my Twitch channel. The link is in the description below. If you've not already done so, why not subscribe, or follow? It's free. You could also consider becoming a patron if you want to see my videos a bit early, or maybe just come say hi on Discord or Twitch next time I'm live. You can find links to all of my things like social media in the description below. And, as always, I shall return soon. So, until then, be excellent to each other, have an amazing day, and thanks for watching. Farewell.